I died, coughing up blood on my mother-in-law's pristine white rug, while my husband's pregnant mistress complained about the stain. They took my money, my health, and finally, my life. But then I opened my eyes. I was 26 again, sitting in the very same cafe, where that same mistress was about to demand I step aside. They wanted each other so badly. Fine. I decided to wrap them up with a bow and gift them to one another. Let the games begin. The rug was cashmere, white, unforgiving. I remember staring at the crimson spreading across its fibers, wondering how much bleach Beatrice would use to erase me. My lungs burned. Every breath was a rusted blade scraping against my ribs. I reached out, my fingers trembling, brushing the polished leather of my husband's shoe. Arthur didn't look down. He was too busy rubbing Chloe's back. "Arthur, the smell," Chloe had whined, pinching her nose. Her pregnant belly pressed against his hip. "It's making me nauseous. Can't the paramedics hurry up?" "Don't look, babe," Arthur murmured. "Just look at me." Beatrice, my mother-in-law, stood by the doorway, holding a cup of herbal tea. "Honestly, Clara, you couldn't have collapsed in the kitchen? On the linoleum? This rug was imported." That was the last thing I heard. The sheer, grotesque absurdity of it. I had worked 80-hour weeks to pay for that house. I had swallowed Beatrice's daily venom, enduring her endless demands for absolute submission. I had forgiven Arthur's lapses in judgment. I let them grind me down to bone and dust, convinced that endurance was a synonym for love. It wasn't. It was just a slow suicide. My vision narrowed to a pinprick, then snapped to black. Then came the jolt. It wasn't a peaceful awakening. It felt like being violently shoved from a moving car. I gasped, my hands slamming flat against a cold, hard surface. "Wow. Dramatic much?" The voice was high, nasal, and dipped in fake sympathy. I blinked. The white cashmere rug was gone. The coppery taste of blood vanished, replaced by the sharp, bitter scent of over-roasted espresso. I was sitting in a booth at a local cafe. The sun was streaming through the window, painfully bright. Sitting across from me was Chloe. She wasn't pregnant yet, or at least she wasn't showing. She wore a tight pink top and a knockoff Chanel necklace. Her phone was face up on the table, displaying a picture of her and Arthur at a beach I had paid for. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked down at my hands. They were unblemished. No IV bruises. No tremor from the exhaustion that had plagued my final months. I checked the date on my watch. May 14th, 3 years ago. The exact day I had discovered the affair. The first time around, Chloe had ambushed me here. She told me about Arthur, told me they were in love, and demanded I divorce him. I had cried. I had thrown a glass of water. I had gone home and fought for my marriage, playing right into their hands, tying myself to a sinking ship out of pure, stubborn pride. "Did you hear what I said, Clara?" Chloe sighed, swirling her iced latte with a green straw. "Arthur and I are in love. He's going to leave you. He only stayed this long because he feels sorry for you. I mean, look at you. You work all the time. You're exhausted. You don't even try to keep him happy." I stared at her, really stared at her. I saw the greed dancing in her eyes, the desperate need to secure a man she believed was a prize. She thought Arthur was wealthy. Why wouldn't she? Arthur drove a BMW, wore tailored suits, and picked up the tab at expensive restaurants. What Chloe didn't know, what nobody knew except my accountant, was that Arthur's lifestyle was entirely funded by my consulting firm. Arthur was a mid-level manager drowning in credit card debt. His parents, Beatrice and Richard, lived in our guest wing because they had squandered their retirement and lost their own home. I was the golden goose. A slow, strange sensation bloomed in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sorrow. It was absolute crystalline clarity. "You're right," I said. Chloe stopped swirling her straw. Her perfectly drawn eyebrows pulled together. "Excuse me?" "You're right," I repeated, my voice steady. I leaned back in the booth, crossing my arms. "He deserves someone who can focus on him. And you deserve him, Chloe. You really do." She blinked, entirely thrown off script. She had come prepared for a screaming match. She had come prepared for me to call her names so she could go back to Arthur and play the victim. You're not going to fight me?" she asked, suspicion lacing her voice. "Why would I fight for a man who wants to be with someone else?" I offered a soft, tragic smile. "If you love him, take him. I won't stand in your way." I stood up, dropping a $10 bill on the table to cover my black coffee. I looked down at her. She looked triumphant, but deeply confused. "Just one piece of advice, Chloe," I said gently. "Arthur is a proud man. He likes to be the provider. When you move in, let him take care of you. Don't let him know I told you about his family's vast estate." Estate. Chloe's eyes went wide. The bait was set. "Oh, he didn't tell you?" I feigned embarrassment, touching my fingers to my lips. "Never mind. It's old money. Beatrice is very private about it. Just be good to him." I walked out of the cafe into the bright spring air. The moment the door chimed shut behind me, a laugh clawed its way up my throat. It was a dark, breathless sound. I was alive. I was 26, and I was going to burn their entire world to the ground without striking a single match. The house smelled exactly as I remembered, overpowering lavender bleach and stale cigar smoke. I stood in the foyer, letting the heavy oak door click shut behind me. This house, a sprawling 5-bedroom monstrosity in the suburbs, was an anchor. The mortgage was in Arthur's name, a concession to his bruised ego when we bought it. But the down payment and the monthly wires came exclusively from my account. "Clara, is that you?" Beatrice emerged from the living room. She wore a silk dressing gown at 2 in the afternoon. Her face was tight, pulled back by years of expensive skincare I had bankrolled, locked in a perpetual scowl. "You're home early," she observed, her eyes darting to my empty hands. "Did you not pick up my dry cleaning? I explicitly texted you to get my blouses. Arthur is hosting his associates tomorrow, and I need to look presentable. In my past life, I would have apologized. I would have dropped my purse, grabbed the car keys, and fought through rush hour traffic to retrieve her damn blouses. I would have done it because I craved her approval, desperate for the family I never had. Today, I just looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't a formidable matriarch. She was a parasite in silk. "I forgot," I said, slipping my shoes off. Beatrice froze. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "You forgot? Clara, that is entirely unacceptable. When Arthur gets home—" "Beatrice," I interrupted, walking past her into the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water. "We need to talk. It's about Arthur." She followed me, her slippers slapping aggressively against the hardwood. "What has he done now? Did you nag him again?" "I swear, Clara, if you just learn to be softer." "Arthur is in love with someone else," I said flatly. Silence descended on the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Beatrice leaned against the marble island, her expression calculating. She wasn't shocked. Of course she wasn't. She had probably smelled Chloe's cheap perfume on his collars for months. "Well," Beatrice said, adjusting her collar, feigning distress. "Men have needs, Clara. If you were home more often, perhaps." "Her name is Chloe," I continued, ignoring her. "And honestly, Beatrice, I think she's a better fit for your family. She comes from a very prominent background. Old money, the kind that doesn't need to work 80 hours a week." I watched the gears turn in Beatrice's head. The words, old money, were a narcotic to her. She practically, visibly salivated. "Old money," she repeated, her tone instantly shifting. "Yes, her father is in real estate development, I believe. Or perhaps international shipping. She's very private about it." I took a sip of water. "I met her today. She's beautiful, submissive, eager to please a mother-in-law. She actually mentioned how much she admires women of your vintage." "She did?" Beatrice touched her cheek, her vanity immediately engaged. "She did. I realized today that I'm just holding Arthur back from the life he truly deserves. I'm going to give him a divorce. I won't ask for a dime of his money. He can keep the house, the cars, everything. I just want a clean break." Beatrice's eyes widened. She thought she had just hit the jackpot. To get rid of the stubborn, overworked daughter-in-law and replace her with a wealthy, submissive heiress and keep the 5-bedroom house. It was a dream come true for her. "Clara," Beatrice said, suddenly dripping with fake maternal warmth, "I am so sorry it has come to this, but sometimes people just grow apart. We will always cherish the time you spent with us. I know you will." I smiled. I spent the next 2 hours packing my personal belongings. I didn't touch the furniture. I didn't touch the flat-screen TVs or the expensive art. I took my clothes, my jewelry, my laptop, and a locked firebox containing my financial documents. At 6 o'clock, the front door opened. Arthur's heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. "Clara, Mom, I'm home." I walked downstairs, my 2 suitcases waiting by the door. Arthur stopped dead in his tracks. He was handsome, in a weak, soft sort of way. He had the kind of face that belonged on a country club brochure, but crumpled under the slightest pressure. "Clara, what's going on? Are you going somewhere?" He looked nervous. He knew Chloe was planning to talk to me today. He was bracing for the screaming, the tears, the flying plates. I walked over to the console table and picked up a manila folder. I had printed it from a legal template an hour ago. "Chloe told me everything, Arthur," I said, my voice trembling perfectly. I conjured the ghost of the pain I used to feel, letting it wet my eyes. "I know about the affair." Arthur panicked. "Clara, baby, listen. It's a mistake. She cornered me. I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you." He was lying. He didn't love me. He loved my bank account. He loved the comfort I provided. "Don't lie, Arthur," I whispered, stepping back from him. "She loves you, and I love you too much to keep you trapped in a marriage that isn't making you happy." I shoved the folder into his chest. He took it reflexively. "These are the divorce papers, a standard dissolution. I'm not contesting anything. You keep the house. You keep your car. You keep your accounts. I'm just leaving." Arthur stared at the paper, bewildered. You're not taking the house? It's in your name, Arthur," I said softly. "You provided it for us. It's yours. Just sign the papers, and we can end this peacefully. Chloe is waiting for you." Beatrice appeared from the kitchen, wrapping an arm around her son. Arthur, let her go, she said smoothly. If Clara feels she cannot fulfill her duties as a wife, it's best we move forward. We have to think of your happiness. Arthur looked at his mother, then at me. His ego inflated right before my eyes. He actually believed he had won. He believed he was walking away with a house, a beautiful new woman, and absolute freedom, all while completely avoiding any consequences for his cheating. If that's what you want, Clara, Arthur said, trying to look somber while fighting a grin. It is, I said. I walked out the door, loaded my suitcases into my sensible sedan, and drove away. As I turned the corner, I pulled over and took out my phone. I logged into my banking app. I navigated to the joint checking account that paid the mortgage, the electricity, Beatrice's credit cards, and the leased BMW. I transferred the entire balance, my money, earned from my contracts, into my private, individual account. Then, I canceled the auto pay on the mortgage. I canceled the auto pay on the utilities. I canceled the lease payments. The house was heavily underwater. The property taxes were due in 3 weeks. The electric bill in that mansion averaged $600 a month. Arthur made exactly enough to cover his own personal lunches and maybe his golf membership. I tapped confirm on the transfers. The screen flashed a green check mark. Enjoy the house, Arthur, I said to the empty car. It took exactly 3 days for the honeymoon phase to shatter. I had rented a beautiful, minimalist loft downtown. It had exposed brick walls, huge windows that let the sunlight pour in, and 0 cashmere rugs. There was no lavender bleach. There were no demands. For the first time in years, I woke up naturally at 7 in the morning, made myself a cup of tea, and sat on my balcony watching the city wake up. I didn't have to hire a private investigator to know what was happening at the estate. I had Sarah. Sarah was a mutual friend. Well, she was Arthur's cousin, but she had always despised Beatrice and possessed a nose for gossip that rivaled a bloodhound. On the 4th morning of my freedom, my phone buzzed. Clara, Sarah breathed into the receiver, sounding like she was hiding in a closet. It is World War III over here. I smiled, taking a sip of my Earl Grey. Do tell. Okay, so Chloe moved in yesterday, Sarah began, speaking in rapid-fire bursts. She brought like 12 suitcases, mostly shoes. She completely took over your old walk-in closet. Arthur threw out all his golf clubs to make room. A sacrifice for true love, I murmured. Right. So this morning, Beatrice comes downstairs at 6 a.m. You know how she is. She expects breakfast on the table. She starts banging pots and pans, yelling for Chloe to come down and make her oatmeal and poach her eggs. I closed my eyes, savoring the mental image. I knew that routine. Beatrice used noise as a weapon to establish dominance early in the day. And, I prompted, Chloe came down in a silk teddy, screaming at Beatrice for waking her up. Sarah giggled. She literally told Beatrice, I'm pregnant, not the help. Hire a maid. Clara, I thought Beatrice was going to have a stroke. Her left eye started twitching. But Chloe is old money. I feigned innocence. Surely Beatrice understands that heiresses don't poach eggs. That's the best part, Sarah squealed. Beatrice tried to play nice. She said, Oh, Chloe, dear, I know your family has staff, but in this house, we value a woman's touch. And Chloe looked at her like she was crazy and said, My family lives in a trailer park in Reno. What are you talking about? I let out a genuine, hearty laugh. It bounced off the brick walls of my loft. Clara, Beatrice dropped her favorite mug. It shattered everywhere. Then she started screaming at Arthur, demanding to know why he brought trash into her house. Arthur started yelling that Chloe was the love of his life. Then the power company called. I perked up. The power company. Yeah. Apparently, the bill bounced. Arthur checked the joint account, and he was completely freaking out. He kept muttering, "Where is the buffer? Where is Clara's buffer?" He tried to use his credit card to pay it, and it was declined, maxed out. The reality of their situation was a slowly closing vice. For years, Arthur had coasted on the illusion of success. Beatrice had coasted on the illusion of aristocracy. They had propped up their massive egos on the sturdy foundation of my exhaustion. Now, that foundation was gone. What did Chloe do? I asked. Chloe started crying. She asked Arthur why his card was declined. She told him she had an appointment for a prenatal massage at the Ritz and needed the platinum card. When Arthur told her things were a little tight this month, she threw a vase at him. Sarah took a deep breath. "It's beautiful, Clara. It's a beautiful disaster. I have to go. Beatrice is crying in the rose garden. I'm going to go ask her if she needs water, just to see her glare. Keep me posted, Sarah." I hung up the phone and set it on the glass table. My chest felt light. The crushing anxiety that used to define my existence. The constant worry of how to keep Arthur happy, how to appease Beatrice, how to keep the financial plates spinning, was entirely gone. Later that evening, my phone rang again. It wasn't Sarah. It was Arthur. I let it ring 3 times before sliding my finger across the screen. "Hello, Clara," Arthur said. His voice was tight, strained. He sounded like a man who hadn't slept, which was entirely accurate, given his new living arrangements. "Hey, how are you settling in?" "I'm wonderful, Arthur. The new place is great. How are things with Chloe? Is she enjoying the house?" He cleared his throat. Yeah. It's an adjustment. Listen, Clara, I was going over the finances today." "Oh?" I kept my tone breezy. "Yeah. It looks like there was a bank error or something. The joint account is empty. The auto-pays all bounced. The mortgage company called." "Oh, that wasn't an error, Arthur," I said smoothly. "I took my money out when I left. You kept the house and the cars, remember? We agreed to a clean break. I wouldn't dream of meddling in your finances anymore. Your money?" Arthur's voice spiked an octave. "Clara, that was our money. We're married. We're separated, Arthur. The papers are filed. My income from my business is mine. You have your salary. You're the man of the house, right? The provider. You don't need your ex-wife paying for your mistress's electricity. Clara, you don't understand." He sounded desperate now, the charming veneer cracking completely. "The mortgage is $8,000 a month. My take-home is $4,000. Mom needs her supplements. Chloe wants to redecorate the nursery. I can't breathe." I walked over to my window, looking down at the streetlights glowing in the dusk. I thought of the white cashmere rug. I thought of the coldness in his eyes when he told me not to look at him while I bled. "Then you'll learn to hold your breath, Arthur," I whispered. I hung up the phone, blocked his number, and poured myself a glass of wine. The show had only just begun. 2 weeks later, the physical decay of the estate began. I didn't have to drive by to see it. Sarah documented it all with the meticulous care of a war correspondent. She sent me pictures on Tuesday afternoon. The pristine, manicured lawn I used to pay a landscaping crew $600 a month to maintain was already fighting back. Dandelions aggressively pushed through the Kentucky bluegrass. The rhododendrons looked thirsty. Arthur tried to mow it himself, Sarah texted, attaching a blurry photo of Arthur wrestling with a heavy, gas-powered push mower he had clearly borrowed. He wore khakis and a polo shirt soaked dark with sweat. He gave up after 2 strips. He threw a wrench into the hydrangeas. I chuckled, setting my phone down on my desk. My consulting firm, unburdened by my personal exhaustion, was thriving. I had just secured a 6-figure contract with a logistics company. I was sleeping 8 hours a night. My skin had cleared. I felt a decade younger. Meanwhile, my former home was turning into a pressure cooker. The illusion of wealth is an incredibly expensive thing to maintain. Without my quiet, constant influx of cash, Arthur and Beatrice hit a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. The real catalyst, however, was the BMW. It happened on a Thursday morning. Chloe was sitting on the front porch, drinking a green smoothie and scrolling through her phone, trying to ignore Beatrice loudly complaining about the dust on the baseboards inside. A heavy-duty tow truck backed into the driveway. Its warning beeps echoed through the quiet, affluent cul-de-sac. Arthur rushed out the front door, half-dressed for work, his tie hanging loose around his neck. Hey, what are you doing? Stop. The tow truck driver, a massive guy with a clipboard and zero patience for suburban panic, didn't even look up. He hooked the chains to the front axle of Arthur's pristine, leased 7 Series. You can't take this, Arthur sputtered, grabbing the driver's shoulder. There's been a mistake with the bank. I'm sorting it out today. The driver handed Arthur the clipboard. 3 months behind on the lease, buddy. Bank says take it. Sign here or don't. I'm taking it either way. Chloe stood up, her smoothie forgotten. The neighbors, the cardiologists, the corporate lawyers, the people Beatrice desperately tried to impress, were stepping out onto their porches or peering through their plantation shutters. Arthur? Chloe's voice was shrill, cutting through the morning air. What is he doing to your car? Tell him to leave. Go inside, Chloe, Arthur hissed, his face burning a dark, humiliating crimson. No! Arthur, stop him! How are we supposed to get to my doctor's appointment? Are we taking the bus? Beatrice appeared in the doorway, clutching the collar of her silk robe. She took one look at the tow truck, one look at the staring neighbors, and let out a strangled gasp before darting back inside, slamming the heavy oak door shut. Arthur watched, paralyzed by shame, as the truck lifted the front of his beloved car and dragged it out of the driveway, the tires squealing in protest. It left behind a dark, embarrassing oil stain on the concrete. Chloe marched down the steps, jabbing a manicured finger into Arthur's chest. What is going on? You told me you were wealthy. You told me this house was yours. Why is your car getting repossessed? Arthur looked around frantically. Keep your voice down. It's just a cash flow issue. Clara tied up some assets in the divorce. It's temporary. Tied up assets? Chloe laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Your mother asked me for $200 for groceries yesterday. She said the credit cards were frozen. I thought you guys had old money. Arthur froze. Old money? Who told you that? Clara did. At the cafe, Chloe shouted, not caring who heard. She said your family had an estate. She said you were just private about it. I could perfectly picture the moment Arthur's brain short-circuited. He realized, right then, that the narrative he had carefully constructed to lure Chloe into his bed was unraveling. More importantly, he realized I had been the one to feed her the lie that sealed his fate. "There is no old money, Chloe," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a defeated whisper. "My parents are broke. They live here because they have nowhere else to go. Clara paid for everything." Chloe stared at him, the greed in her eyes, the very thing that had anchored her to him, evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, calculating horror. She was pregnant. She had moved out of her shared apartment. She had banked her entire future on a golden goose that didn't exist. She turned on her heel, marched back into the house, and the screaming match began. Sarah called me 10 minutes later, breathless. "Clara, the car is gone, and Chloe is currently throwing Arthur's shoes out the second-story window." "Is she really?" I asked, opening a fresh spreadsheet on my laptop. "It's raining loafers," Sarah confirmed. "I think they're finally figuring it out." "Give it time," I said softly. "The mortgage company hasn't even sent the first warning letter yet." Poverty, when you aren't used to it, doesn't just empty your bank account. It strips away your dignity, layer by excruciating layer. By the third week, the refrigerator in the sprawling 5-bedroom house was a barren wasteland. Beatrice, who previously refused to eat anything that wasn't organic, locally sourced, and delivered by a premium grocery service, was now faced with the harsh reality of a severe budget. Arthur's paycheck came in. After paying the minimum balances on his maxed-out credit cards, an attempt to keep them from going to collections, he had barely enough to keep the water and electricity running. The grocery budget was non-existent. Sarah went over for a wellness check under the guise of family duty and reported back the same evening. We met for drinks at a high-end lounge downtown. I ordered a dirty martini. "I walked into the kitchen," Sarah said, picking an olive off a toothpick, and Arthur was cooking spaghetti, just plain spaghetti, with a jar of generic tomato sauce that cost $1.50. No meat, no parmesan, just red paste and noodles. I took a sip of my drink, savoring the cold bite of the gin. And Beatrice, she was sitting at the island, staring at the bowl like it was radioactive. She literally asked Arthur if he had washed the pasta before boiling it because it smelled cheap. Chloe wasn't even in the room. She locked herself in the master bedroom and ordered a pizza with her last credit card. She refused to share. The tension in the house was becoming a physical entity, suffocating them all. They needed cash, and they needed it desperately. Beatrice, terrified of the neighborhood finding out they were destitute, decided to take matters into her own hands. She decided to liquidate her closet. Over the years, I had bought Beatrice several designer handbags for her birthdays and Mother's Days. Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Prada. It was the cost of doing business, to keep her quiet and off my back. Beatrice packed 3 of them into a discreet tote bag and had Arthur drive her to a high-end luxury consignment shop in the city. She walked in, head held high, expecting to walk out with $5,000 in crisp bills. The clerk, a sharp-eyed woman with zero tolerance for arrogance, took the bags to the back counter. Beatrice stood by the register, drumming her manicured fingers, already planning how she would spend the money. A private chef for the week, perhaps, or a spa day to escape Chloe's constant complaining. The clerk returned, sliding the bags back across the glass counter. "I can offer you $300 for the Prada," the clerk said flatly. "I'm passing on the other 2, Beatrice scoffed, clutching her pearls. Excuse me? That Chanel bag cost $4,000. It is a classic flap bag. It's heavily worn, the clerk pointed out, tapping a spot on the leather. There are pen marks on the interior lining. The corners are scuffed, and the hardware is tarnished. And the Louis Vuitton is a fake. A fake! Beatrice shrieked, her face turning purple. My daughter-in-law bought that for me in Paris. Your daughter-in-law bought it on a sidewalk, or from a very good replica website, the clerk said, unbothered. The stitching is uneven, and the serial code doesn't match our database. 300 for the Prada. Take it or leave it. Beatrice took the $300. She walked out of the store, humiliated and furious. I knew the Louis Vuitton was fake. I had bought it in my previous life, shortly before I died, specifically because I was tired of funding her vanity, while she actively destroyed my marriage. I had paid $80 for it in a dark alley market. The fact that the time loop had preserved that specific petty vengeance brought a genuine smile to my face. When Beatrice got home, she didn't buy groceries. She hid the $300 in her sock drawer. It was every woman for herself in that house. Arthur, meanwhile, was drowning. His co-workers were asking why he was taking the bus to work. He lied and said the BMW was in the shop for a rare engine part imported from Germany. He started skipping team lunches because he couldn't afford the $20 salads. He tried to sell my things. He opened the locked firebox I had left behind, hoping to find stock certificates or emergency cash. He found nothing but voided checks and old tax returns. He walked into my old home office, intending to sell the expensive teakwood desk and the dual monitor setup I used to work on. Chloe was already in there. She had found my jewelry box. I had deliberately left it behind. It was a heavy, ornate wooden box containing diamond earrings, a sapphire pendant, and several thick gold bracelets. "What are you doing?" Arthur demanded, stepping into the room. Chloe slammed the box shut, pulling it to her chest. "I'm taking what's owed to me. I need prenatal vitamins. I need maternity clothes. Since you clearly can't provide them, I'm selling her jewelry. You can't do that." Arthur stepped forward. "That's her stuff. And if anyone is selling it to pay the mortgage, it's me. Try and take it from me, Arthur." Chloe spat, her eyes flashing with a wild, feral intensity. "Touch me, and I'll call the police. I'll tell them you assaulted your pregnant girlfriend." Arthur backed away. He was weak. He had always been weak. He backed down from conflict, unless he held all the cards. With me, he held my need for a family as leverage. With Chloe, he had nothing. Chloe took the jewelry box to a pawn shop the next morning. The pawnbroker dumped the sparkling contents onto a felt tray. He put a jeweler's loop to his eye, examined the diamonds, and then tested the gold with a chemical drop. He looked up at Chloe. "Cubic zirconia. The metal is brass with a gold plating. It's costume jewelry. Whole box is worth maybe $50, if I'm feeling generous." Chloe threw a tantrum right there in the shop, sweeping the fake jewels off the counter onto the floor. I hadn't just taken my money when I left. In the 3 days before I handed Arthur the divorce papers, I had systematically replaced every piece of valuable jewelry I owned with cheap knockoffs from Amazon. The real pieces were safely locked in a safety deposit box at my new bank. They were digging through an empty gold mine, bloodying their fingernails, only to find dirt. By the beginning of the second month, the true love that had justified their betrayal was completely dead. It hadn't just withered. It had been actively murdered by stress, resentment, and a towering stack of past due notices. The house was in a state of advanced neglect, without the cleaning service I had paid for. Dog hair, dust, and grime accumulated on the hardwood floors. The white cashmere rug in the living room, the very rug I had bled on in my previous life, was stained with spilled red wine and muddy footprints. No one cared enough to clean it. Arthur and Chloe barely spoke. When they did, it was a shouting match. Chloe was 5 months pregnant now, her belly visibly rounding. She spent her days aggressively texting Arthur at work, demanding to know when he was going to fix their situation, threatening to leave him and take the baby to her sister's cramped apartment in the city. Arthur was crumbling under the pressure. His performance at work plummeted. He made a desperate, humiliating plea to his boss for a salary advance. He sat in the regional manager's office, sweating through his cheap dress shirt. "Just a few months advance, Tom. I'm going through a messy divorce. My ex-wife tied up all my liquid assets. I just need a bridge loan." Tom, a pragmatic man who only cared about numbers, leaned back in his chair. "Arthur, your sales metrics have dropped 40% in the last 6 weeks. You missed 2 client meetings. I can't justify an advance. In fact, if your numbers don't improve by the end of the quarter, we're going to have a very different conversation regarding your future here." Arthur left the office, feeling like he was walking to the gallows. He had no safety net. I was the safety net, and I had cut myself loose. Beatrice, cornered and desperate, finally broke the one rule of her immense pride. She reached out to me. She didn't call. She knew I had blocked her number. Instead, she ambushed me at my office. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had just wrapped up a conference call when my assistant, a sharp young woman named Megan, buzzed my intercom. "Clara, there's an older woman in the lobby. She says she's your mother-in-law. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's refusing to leave." I smiled. "Send her in, Megan." Beatrice walked into my corner office. I watched her take in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern leather furniture, the sheer, undeniable success radiating from the space. She looked terrible. Her roots were showing, a harsh gray line against her dyed blonde hair. Her clothes were clean, but they lacked the crisp, tailored perfection she usually demanded. "Clara," she said, attempting a stiff, maternal smile. She sat down in the chair opposite my desk without being asked. "Beatrice, to what do I owe the pleasure? You're a long way from the suburbs." She sighed, a deep, theatrical sound, and clasped her hands in her lap. "I came to check on you. Arthur said the divorce is nearly finalized. I wanted to make sure you were holding up. I'm doing exceptionally well, Beatrice. Never better. As you can see, the business is booming." Her eyes darted around the room again. The desperation was palpable. "Clara, I won't beat around the bush. Things are difficult right now. Arthur is struggling. Chloe is entirely unhelpful. She is a selfish, demanding girl. You were right to leave, but..." She hesitated, swallowing her pride. It looked painful. "Arthur needs help. He is going to lose the house." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, interlacing my fingers. "The house is in his name, Beatrice. It's his responsibility." "But it was your home too," Beatrice pleaded, leaning forward. "We are family, Clara. You lived under my roof." "I lived under my roof, Beatrice," I corrected her, my voice dropping an octave, cold and hard as steel. "I paid the down payment. I paid the mortgage. I paid for your groceries, your dry cleaning, your car, and the very clothes you are wearing right now. I paid for Arthur to play pretend at being a successful man while he slept with another woman. Beatrice flinched. I gave him exactly what he asked for, I continued, holding her gaze. He wanted Chloe. He wanted the house. He got both. The fact that he can't afford his own life is not my problem. Clara, please. Beatrice's voice broke. Actual tears welled in her eyes. It was the first time I had ever seen her cry, real tears. If the bank takes the house, I have nowhere to go. I'm an old woman. You can't just throw me out on the street. I'm not throwing you anywhere, I said smoothly. The bank is. And frankly, Beatrice, maybe Chloe's prominent, old money family can take you in, since she admires women of your vintage. Beatrice's face twisted in agony. She knew I knew. She knew the entire thing had been a trap, and she had walked right into it with open arms. You did this on purpose, she hissed, the sadness evaporating, replaced by the venom I knew so well. You lied to that stupid girl. You set us up to fail. I just stepped out of the way, I replied simply. You destroyed yourselves. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a business to run. Megan, my assistant, opened the door immediately. Yes, Clara. Please escort Beatrice to the elevators. Beatrice stood up, her hands shaking. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. I looked back with absolute indifference. She turned and walked out, her footsteps heavy and defeated. 3 days later, the postman walked up the cracked driveway of the suburban estate. Arthur opened the front door. He looked haggard, a shadow of the man who used to strut around the country club. The postman handed him a thick envelope sent via certified mail. Arthur signed for it with a trembling hand. He didn't need to open it to know what it was. The return address was the mortgage lender. It was the formal notice of default. Pre-foreclosure had officially begun. Arthur walked into the kitchen, dropping the envelope on the counter next to a stack of unpaid utility bills. Chloe walked in behind him, holding her lower back. She looked at the envelope, then at Arthur. What is that? She demanded. It's over, Arthur said softly, burying his face in his hands. They're taking the house. We have 90 days to vacate. Chloe stared at him for a long, agonizing moment. The last tether keeping her tied to this sinking ship finally snapped. No, Chloe said, her voice eerily calm. They are taking your house. I am not having my baby in a homeless shelter. She turned around, walked upstairs, and began packing her suitcases. The perfect life they had stolen from me was finally collapsing, burying them all in the rubble. And I was thousands of miles away from the blast zone, watching the smoke rise. Chloe's packing was not a quiet affair. It was a violent, chaotic tearing apart of the master bedroom. She threw hangers into open suitcases, uncaring if the clothes were wrinkled. She swept the contents of the bathroom vanity, expensive serums and imported lotions she had bought on Arthur's dying credit cards, directly into a trash bag. Arthur stood in the doorway, his hands gripping the frame so tightly, his knuckles were bone white. Chloe, stop. Just stop for a second and let's talk about this. There is nothing to talk about, Arthur, she snapped, yanking a pair of designer boots from the closet floor. You lied to me. You're broke. You're losing the house. What exactly is there to discuss? The weather. I can fix it, he pleaded, his voice cracking. The polished, arrogant man I had married was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger, reeking of stale sweat and panic. I'll get a second job. I'll borrow money from Tom. We can rent a nice apartment downtown, just for a little while, until I get back on my feet. Chloe zipped the first suitcase with a harsh, ripping sound. A second job? Doing what? You can barely do your first job. and an apartment. With her, she pointed a perfectly manicured finger toward the hallway, where Beatrice was hovering. Beatrice looked like a ghost haunting her own life, clutching her silk robe, her face pale and drawn. "I am not moving into a cramped apartment with your mother," Chloe continued, her voice dripping with disgust. "I am 23 years old. I am pregnant. I am not spending the best years of my life acting as a nursemaid to a woman who complains about the brand of bottled water I buy." Beatrice gasped, stepping into the light. "You ungrateful little tramp. Arthur took you in. He gave you a home. You are carrying my grandchild." Chloe turned, resting her hands on her swollen stomach. She looked Beatrice up and down, a slow, cruel smirk spreading across her face. "Let's get one thing straight, Beatrice. Arthur didn't take me in. He lured me in. He played the big, successful executive, swiping platinum cards and talking about his estate. He bought me with money he didn't even earn. It was Clara's money. The second Clara left, you both turned into exactly what you are: pathetic, helpless leeches. How dare you speak to my mother that way?" Arthur yelled, stepping forward, a brief, pathetic flare of his old ego surfacing. Chloe didn't flinch. She grabbed her heavy purse and slung it over her shoulder. "Don't raise your voice at me, Arthur. You couldn't even afford to put gas in the rental car yesterday. You have absolutely nothing to offer me. You were a terrible investment." She grabbed the handles of her two largest suitcases and rolled them toward the door. Arthur stood in her way. For a second, I think he genuinely considered physically stopping her. But Chloe just stared him down, her eyes flat and dead. "Move," she said. Arthur's shoulders slumped. He stepped aside. Chloe rolled her bags down the wide, curved staircase. The wheels thumped rhythmically against the expensive hardwood I had meticulously chosen 5 years ago. Thump, 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 the sound of their destruction echoing through the empty halls. An Uber XL was waiting in the driveway. The driver popped the trunk. Chloe handed him the bags, climbed into the back seat, and slammed the door. She didn't look back. Arthur walked out onto the porch, watching the black SUV back out of the driveway and disappear down the street. It was a beautiful, cloudless Tuesday morning. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, entirely indifferent to the fact that his world had just ended. He sank onto the top step, burying his face in his hands. Inside, Beatrice didn't console him. She walked into the kitchen, opened the empty refrigerator, stared at a single rotting lemon on the bottom shelf, and began to sob. It wasn't a gentle, delicate cry. It was a harsh, ugly wail. The wail of a woman realizing the velvet ropes had finally been dropped, and she was standing on the outside with the rest of the world. The 90-day pre-foreclosure period was a slow, agonizing death by 1,000 cuts. I kept tabs on them through Sarah, who by this point felt less like a gossip and more like a morbid historian documenting the fall of Rome. The utilities were the first to go. Arthur couldn't make the payments, and the companies finally cut their losses. First went the Wi-Fi, then the water, then the power. For the final 3 weeks, Arthur and Beatrice lived in a 5-bedroom mansion in the dark. "Clara, it's actually getting hard to watch," Sarah told me over lunch one afternoon, picking at her salad. "I drove by last night. There were no lights on, just a single candle flickering in the living room window. Beatrice has been sneaking into the neighbor's yard at 2 a.m. to use their garden hose to fill buckets of water just so they can flush the toilets." I cut a piece of my steak, chewing slowly. Did the neighbors notice? Oh, absolutely. The Hendersons installed motion sensor floodlights specifically because of it. Beatrice triggered them 2 nights ago. She was caught standing in their hydrangeas, holding 2 Home Depot buckets, lit up like a stadium concert. Mrs. Henderson threatened to call the cops. Pride is a heavy thing to drag around in the dark, I noted, taking a sip of my sparkling water. Arthur finally lost his job on day 82. Tom had warned him. His numbers had tanked. His hygiene had noticeably deteriorated due to the lack of running water, and he had started sleeping in his cubicle because it was air-conditioned. When HR finally handed him his termination papers, Arthur didn't even argue. He just packed his desk into a cardboard box and took the bus home. On day 91, the sheriff arrived. It was a Tuesday. I had taken the morning off. I drove my car to the affluent suburb, parking a block away under the shade of a large oak tree. I rolled the windows down, enjoying the warm breeze, and waited. At exactly 9 a.m., a white cruiser pulled into the driveway. 2 deputies stepped out, walking up to the heavy oak door. They knocked loudly. "Sheriff's Department, we have a court order for eviction. Open the door." It took 3 minutes for the door to open. When it did, Arthur stood there. He looked 10 years older. He wore a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans that hung loosely off his frame. He had lost at least 15 pounds. Behind him, the house looked like a tomb. "Mr. Lancaster," the older deputy said, handing him a clipboard. "The property belongs to the bank as of midnight. You have exactly 1 hour to remove your personal belongings and vacate the premises. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property." Arthur nodded silently. He had no fight left. Over the next hour, I watched as Arthur dragged black trash bags full of clothes out to the curb. He didn't have money for a moving truck. He didn't even have a car. He piled the trash bags onto the immaculate sidewalk, creating a small mountain of garbage in front of the manicured lawns of his wealthy neighbors. Then, Beatrice emerged. She was trying to salvage whatever dignity she possessed. She wore her best remaining silk blouse, a pair of dark sunglasses, and her knockoff Prada bag. But there was no hiding the reality. She walked down the driveway, her posture stiff, and sat down on one of the trash bags next to a rusty push mower. She looked small, frail, ordinary. I put my car in drive and pulled slowly down the street. I stopped directly in front of the house, idling by the curb. Arthur looked up. His eyes widened when he saw my car. He walked toward the passenger window as I rolled it down. He looked at my crisp blazer, my styled hair, the expensive watch on my wrist, the life he had thrown away. Clara, he breathed. His voice was raspy. I picked up a manila envelope from the passenger seat and held it out the window. "Final decree absolute, Arthur," I said, my tone neutral. "The judge signed it yesterday morning. The marriage is officially dissolved. I thought you'd want a copy for your records." He took the envelope with trembling hands. He stared at it, then looked back at me. "Clara, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I ruined everything. I know that now. I know what you did for me. I didn't do it for you, Arthur. I did it because I thought you loved me." I corrected him gently. "But you only loved what I could provide. Now, you have exactly what you provided for yourself." Beatrice stood up from her trash bag, pulling her sunglasses down. She saw me, her lips pressing into a thin, bitter line. She didn't say a word. She just looked away, staring down the street, waiting for the cheap taxi. Arthur had somehow scraped together the money to call. "Where are you going to go?" I asked Arthur. "A motel," he muttered, looking at his worn shoes. Out by the highway. It's weekly rates. I have an interview at a hardware store tomorrow. The man who used to mock retail workers was now begging for a chance to wear their apron. Good luck, Arthur, I said. I rolled the window up, checked my mirrors, and drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. The past was finally where it belonged, dead and buried. A year is a long time when you are moving forward. It is an eternity when you are trapped. The bank auctioned the house. I had brief, petty thoughts of buying it back for pennies on the dollar, just to own the space that had nearly killed me. But I realized that holding on to the house was holding on to the poison. I let it go. An aggressive real estate developer bought the lot, deemed the house a structural mess due to water damage and neglect, and bulldozed the entire property. Where the white cashmere rug once lay, there was now just an excavated pit of dirt, waiting for a new foundation. It felt fitting. My business expanded. I opened a second office in Chicago and hired a team of junior consultants. I bought a penthouse with a wraparound terrace that overlooked the skyline. I filled it with color, emerald greens, deep sapphire blues, vibrant art, no whites, no beige, no lavender bleach. Arthur and Chloe, however, were permanently tethered to each other in the most miserable way possible. I found myself at the county courthouse on a rainy Thursday morning. I was there as a character witness for a client undergoing a messy corporate split. As I walked down the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway toward the elevators, I heard a familiar, shrill voice echoing from family court. He owes me $4,000. You can't just let him walk out of here. I paused, standing near a heavy wooden pillar. Chloe stormed out of the courtroom doors. She was holding a screaming infant against her hip. She looked exhausted. Her hair was tied up in a messy knot. Her clothes were stained with baby formula, and the arrogant, greedy spark in her eyes had been entirely extinguished by the brutal reality of single motherhood. Arthur followed her out seconds later, trailed by a tired-looking public defender. Arthur was unrecognizable. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by a faded button-down shirt that was frayed at the cuffs. His hair was thinning rapidly, and he walked with a slight stoop, the weight of his failures permanently compressing his spine. "Chloe, I don't have it," Arthur hissed, looking around nervously, embarrassed by her shouting. "The judge just garnished my wages from the hardware store. They're taking 50% of my paycheck. I literally cannot give you blood from a stone." "Then figure it out," Chloe screamed, adjusting the crying baby. "I am living in my sister's basement. I had to sell my car. You told me you would take care of us." "I told you that when I had a house and a career," Arthur shouted back, his temper finally snapping. "You ruined my life. If you hadn't come to that cafe, Clara would never have left. I would still have my house." Chloe let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "You blame me? You were the one sleeping with me in her bed. You were the one swiping her credit cards." They stood in the hallway, screaming at each other. Two drowning people, furiously, trying to push the other underwater to catch a breath. I watched them for a long moment. In my past life, Arthur had stood over my dying body, comforting this woman while I bled out. They had been a united front, a team built on the foundation of my suffering. Now, they were each other's personal hell. The judge had ordered maximum child support based on Arthur's previous earning history, a brutal legal reality that traps deadbeat parents. Because Arthur had voluntarily tanked his career, the court didn't care that he now worked at a hardware store. He owed the money regardless. And Beatrice? From what Sarah told me, Beatrice rarely left the small, two-bedroom apartment Arthur rented in a dangerous part of town. She refused to get a job, claiming she had bad knees. She spent her days watching daytime television, complaining about the noise from the neighbors, and blaming Arthur for not being man enough to keep a wife. I stepped out from behind the pillar and walked toward the elevators. Arthur stopped yelling mid-sentence. His eyes locked onto mine. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I simply walked past him. I caught a brief glimpse of his face. The raw, agonizing recognition of exactly what he had thrown away, walking past him in a tailored suit, looking utterly indifferent to his existence. He didn't speak. He couldn't. I stepped into the elevator, turned around, and met his gaze one last time as the heavy metal doors slid shut, cutting him off completely. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing patches of bright, piercing blue sky. I pulled my phone out and ordered a black coffee from my favorite cafe downtown. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with cold, clean air. There was no pain. There was no burning in my chest. Being reborn isn't just about getting a second chance. It isn't just about watching your enemies destroy themselves with the very greed that once fueled them. True rebirth is the moment you stop watching them burn, turn your back to the fire, and finally start building your own life in the light. I started walking down the street, my heels clicking sharply against the wet pavement, entirely and beautifully alone. If you enjoyed watching Clara reclaim her life and serve absolute karma to Arthur, Beatrice, and Chloe, hit that like button to show your support. The best revenge really is a life well lived. Let me know in the comments below. What was your favorite moment of their downfall? Was it the repo truck, the pawn shop, or the final courtroom showdown? Don't forget to share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that the trash always takes itself out. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next gripping story.